Nice. I was muted. Sorry about that. And welcome to the new episode of Disruption Talks, where we invite experts to share ideas about digital acceleration, winning strategies, innovation, and scaling products. My name is Marek, and I'm the CEO of Netguru, the company behind the series. And today I have a pleasure, I dare to say a double pleasure, on one hand to share a story with you of a great success, a startup success from the Middle East and Africa region, from the MENA region, but on the other hand, on one of our key clients. And today we'll be hosting Adeeb Warsi from Careem, who is a managing director of Platform, also known as a super app. And Careem itself was founded nimbly in 2012, initially as a website for corporate car rentals. Then in 2019, after it grew and added products, it was acquired by Uber for over $3 billion as the first unicorn acquired in the region. And since then, it has been appointing a strategy of becoming a super app. So today from Adeeb, you are going to hear about a day-to-day work of an MD at Careem, about super apps, which are extremely exciting, but also about running a digitally native company that doesn't need digital transformation, but definitely needs digital acceleration. Adeeb, welcome on board. It's wonderful to have you with us.
Thank you for having me, Marek.
So let's start off just by learning more about you. So tell us a bit about your history, what you have done before Careem. What's your background?
Sure. Before I start, for folks who are listening in and dialing in, I don't know from wherever, I'm currently sitting in Dubai, so enjoy the view while I speak to you guys. A little bit about myself. I've been with Careem for the last 5 years. And in that 5-year journey, and we'll probably talk about it while we discuss this, did multiple roles. The latest one that I am running, as you mentioned, is to get Careem on the super app journey, which is going to be a long journey, but really a lot goes into it, but we'll discuss that. Prior to that, I was responsible for starting up some of our delivery businesses, as we call it, mobility of thing businesses. I did that for about 2 years, which basically led us into this whole super app story. And then before that, we were a ride-hailing company only, so working on multiple things around that. Prior to Careem, I spent 6-7 years with the Boston Consulting Group, out of the Los Angeles office, covering tech on Los Angeles and San Francisco clients, in Dubai for a year or two, and then London as well, with a lot of private equity work along the way. So yeah, quite a bit of work. And before that, many moons ago, started my career with GE in the US, back in the days when GE was the biggest market cap company in the world. Clearly, the world has changed since. But I worked on a bunch of tech projects in multiple businesses in GE. So yeah, that's my 1-minute intro.
It was great. Thanks a lot. And I bet there are even more stories from the past roles. But today, let's focus on being an MD at Careem. One of the perks is definitely the view, like you mentioned, out of the window. But tell us, what's your day-to-day life? What's the typical day of an MD at Careem?
So let me kind of give you guys a sense of what it takes, or what is the super app reality, right? And that'll kind of give you a sense for what my day is spent on. So if you think about it, like really super app, we are setting ourselves up as a marketplace for services, right? And as I said, as you look at most of the super apps in the world, you start with a core business, and then you have a customer base, and then you start adding your own services, and then the name of the game of the super app is then it becomes a secular platform where you bring in third-party services, and from a customer standpoint, you bring as many services as possible that is useful within a very tightly put together experience. So for me to do what we need to do, like the first thing that I am very involved in is what is that customer experience on the super app, which goes all the way from what is the Careem brand, how do customers engage and what do they think about the brand, growth strategies, discovery experiences on the app, engagement experiences on the app for the customer. So that's one bucket. The The second one is how do we engage with and what are the experiences for our partners? And partners equals services, internal or external. And from that, commercial conversations in terms of what is our terms of agreements, how do we work, how do we onboard them, how do we tightly knit them with our platform so that we can actually then work on growth, growth plans for them using good experiences on the super app. So that's the second bucket. Then in order to make all of this happen, we have to spend a lot of time on building the platform components. So identity, search, catalog, all these experiences we want to give to our services. And then last but definitely not the least is my time spent on a subscription program. As you'd imagine, all of this comes together within a customer subscription program, i.e. you use our platform and we give you value, and that's a very exciting part of the journey. In addition, we're about to get started on our advertising platform as well. So as you'd imagine, as you start putting this whole ecosystem together and there's a lot of eyeballs, clearly ads would be the next step. So that's where I'm spending quite a bit of time. So yeah, roughly these 5 areas keeps me ample busy and happy.
It seems like, and this is exactly how I imagined when I thought about building a super app. It seemed like there are many pillars at the same time, and maybe it's a tiny bit of an intro to super apps for people that might not have heard about them. So it's a concept that was first used for Tencent's WeChat application in China, and then there are many companies that are trying to make them happen, but it's extremely difficult. To be honest, in Europe, there's nothing like that. So I'm a bit jealous that you have in the MENA region your app. And it's a strategy that you picked up in 2019. When you were starting, like what were the main pillars? Like if there's imagine there's someone who wants to build a super app. How to start actually?
Yeah, so before I tell you what we're doing, let me kind of get you guys acquainted to some of the models in which super apps have evolved, right?
Perfect, thanks.
If you look at the first and the most successful ones coming from China, WeChat was the first one. It started, and again, as I said, the idea is you have a core business, you build that really well, and you have a strong customer base, and then you build an ecosystem around it. So WeChat, for example, was a social media-based core. They built the chat app, which is went explosive in the country, and people spent a lot of time on it, and so therefore they use that as the way to go. Then there are some examples, much like us, the Grabs of the world, the Gojeks of the world, where it started off more with operational businesses, and both Gojek and Grab did it with a ride-hailing core, and then building out other services around it. So we are in that second category, and our path has been that as well, where ride-hailing was our core, and then we basically got from there, added a couple of services which are, as I said, more delivery-based. Then we added pay, and from here the game has started. So yeah, so those are the two contexts. For us, the whole idea for becoming a super app, and we can talk about it later as well, success was hinged on how do we increase, one, the number of transactions on the super app, on the app, and so therefore what services do we need to make that happen, and second, retention, right? The idea is you want more and more of the customers coming back and staying in and using as many services as possible. So everything that we've done so far is basically around that. If you look at it, you can consider the businesses on top as verticals, so ride-hailing, food, groceries, and there are many, many more. And then horizontals would be the pay business or the pay use cases, fintech, everything around fintech, and making the digital payment ecosystem for the customer. So that's basically what we have built this thing on. Now, if you talk about the fact you mentioned that you're jealous that you don't have a super app in Europe, there's a lot of conversation about that, of course, and there's no one answer to it in terms of why there are super apps in one part of the world, why there aren't. Our view is, and we believe it strongly, is both from China, when you look at it, why China did it, why some of the Eastern Asian economies have super apps, and now we're leading that in the Middle East. I think there's a lot to do with the fact of the maturity of infrastructure on which these businesses are built. And in our region, when we started Careem 10 years ago, we have done a lot to put together the basic infrastructure that a business needs to grow. And that is a very strong reason why we would want to basically offer up that infrastructure to third parties, businesses that have a good product market fit, but it takes a lot of time to build that infrastructure to be able to service so many customers. We have invested all that. Why not open it up to basically any service? So that's one reason why this is the prevalence of super apps is still more on the eastern side of the world compared to the west. And there's a second discussion that's happening, but obviously there's no clear answer to it, is how customers engage and absorb information. And on a super app, there's a lot of information, there's a lot of value, and people have to sift through depending on what they need. While on the West, people still want their core experiences for a use case. So anyways, this discussion will go on for an ever, but these are some.
No, but it makes a lot of sense. So I'm in Poland right now, and we had a similar story with banking. So when Poland was getting away from the communism, the whole infrastructure had to be built from ground up. And then for that reason, we have very modern financial institutions, financial banks in the country. So I think there are some similarities as well between those two examples. And you already mentioned a couple of things that you were focusing on when you were building the super app. So you mentioned acquisition of customers. You mentioned the retention. I guess you are also looking at the number of people that are using multiple services at the same time. What else are you looking at in terms of KPIs, indicators?
Yeah, look, I mean, as I said, like some of the key things, obviously, the whole construct for a super app is you have a customer base and you use the same customer base to do more on the platform, i.e. engage with more services. And of course, that experience becomes so attractive, then word of mouth goes out and more customers come on the platform and start using it. So the KPIs that need to move are obviously cost of acquisition for service by service. So for example, you have customers on the ride-hailing side already. You cross-sell those customers to other services. So the acquisition cost for these businesses or services is very low, as ideally zero, but there's something, but way less than going fishing for those customers externally.
Absolutely.
Right? So that's one. And again, as if you pull this thing together and the experience is seamless, then obviously you expect customers to be retaining themselves on the platform a lot more. So retention clearly is very, very critical. And then the idea, the core thing that matters is the number of transactions on the platform going up or not, right? And so we track per customer, what is that average transaction per user over a period of time. And that should be going up for a healthy super app. Now, these are some of the KPIs that we track. Now, the one thing that tells you whether this is working or not is what we call, to your point, multi-service users, right? So these are how many customers in our customer database are now engaging with more than one service. And so the bigger and healthier the growth of that KPI kind of is a predictive number that tells you that the other KPIs will start moving in the right direction or not. So a lot of things that we do on the app, the experiences we put together is really to optimize and maximize that KPI.
And over time, which one was the most challenging to accomplish? It probably changed also over time as you were adopting the strategy. But what was the biggest challenge among all of those areas?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think they all come together in a way, right? Multi-service users or MSUs is a predictive KPI, right? So the hardest part is to bring this ecosystem together, or this whole bunch of experiences together. It's hard, right? You have the services that have to be good enough. Their experiences on each of these services have to be good enough. So the reliability, experience metrics have to be high. And then all of the landing page experience on the super app needs to bring it together, the right discovery, understanding your customer in terms of who possibly needs or will be a good customer to introduce to this service. So that whole customer insight engine needs to be built, which is pretty hard. There's a lot of data science and machine learning that goes behind having a decent outcome from an experience standpoint. So I think it took about a year to have this basic skeleton of experiences for this super app flywheel to start working. Once it starts working, then I think then you start seeing the results automatically, right? So you know, as I said, a few things to consider is make sure the services are delivering a very good experience, then make sure that there's value that's being given to the customer, and that's what we're doing through with our subscription program. We call it Careem Plus, i.e., pay an amount every month, and we guarantee you amazing things. So, for example, right now in Dubai, we give 10% off on all rides, free food delivery, free groceries, and we'll add more things to the basket as we get more tenants on the platform. So that kind of keeps the retention metrics high, and then also does the cross-selling. So yeah, I think it's a pretty complex mesh of experiences that have to come together for these numbers to start moving.
Absolutely. And there's one other thing, because when you started working on the strategy, it was 2019, then pandemic hit. So the world slowed down, but actually you speeded up with developing of the concept. What would you highlight as the key elements that helped you back then accelerate where everything was slowing down?
Yeah, I mean, look, I can sit right now and say that, hey, we did it. It was easy, but I promise you, it was very hard times.
I bet.
COVID. We like to wipe. Everyone would like to wipe those memories from our heads. But I mean, any calamity or any bad situation is also an opportunity, right? So what was clear for us was, we already had intentions of becoming super app anyways, but we thought that at the time when basically the world came to a halt, we knew that our core business, ride hailing, is going to be hit, which obviously it did, and it was true across the world. So while all the turbulence was happening, what we did was fairly quickly realign ourselves organizationally and basically faced our cannons that were working on the ride-hailing side. We reconfigured that org, whether it's product, engineering, design, and even commercial teams, towards the super app endeavor. And therefore, and for us to become a super app, we needed to have a decent experience, as I said, on some of these delivery businesses. So super app experiences, food, groceries, we basically rejigged the portfolio to move towards that. And I think it was a lot of hard work, a lot of effort to then the next 6 months to get us there.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you touched on something else I wanted to mention as well, because I was recently reading an interview with you and saw that you are sunsetting the Careem now. And I was really impressed, because I imagine that when you are building a super app, you want to keep adding things and accommodating them all together under one umbrella. And I saw that on one hand, you made a strategic choice to sunset something. On the other hand, you talk about this openly. And I'm curious about this journey. Like was it an easy decision? And whether you think it's also important when you're building a strategy to not only to keep on adding things, but also knowing where not to invest, where not to focus.
Yeah, look, I mean, for any successful company, you have to be pretty ruthless in terms of decisions you make, and you should work on a few things and do them well. And those choices come to us in our life on a very, very regular basis, and it's hard, I can promise you that, because everything glitters, everything has an opportunity. It's very exciting, and yeah, it gets you really excited about things, but you have to make those hard calls. Now, on the specific question that you asked about Careem Now was a sub brand that we started in 2018, and I was leading that because, as I said, we were a ride-hailing company, and this is an important point. When you are, when you want to start new businesses within a company, which is obviously focused on one thing, there are some specific things that we have learned, and we're not the first one to learn it, but we can just certainly talk about it. That you have to basically take teams out of the core business, give them autonomy, give them the mandate, resource them, and then let them run. And that's where the hustle and the magic elements come together, and something gets born out of a parent. Because without that, it's really hard to get something out, because the mothership will always suck in all those resources. So we started the Careem Now brand to incubate and get some of these business going. So food, grocery, right at the top end of 2020, we launched. We started a last mile delivery business, what we call Careem Express. This is really to support the growing e-commerce in the Middle East. So all of these things we did from 2018 and up till 2020. And then when we decided that we're going to go in a super app mode, then we basically took those experiences and transposed them under the Careem umbrella in the super app world. So this way, we gave these businesses a fair chance to be incubated and become a decent size, and then we got them in onto the super app experience. So that's basically what we did. There's a lot of technical work that had to be done to then move these experiences on our core super app shell. And then we sunsetted the brand from there.
And it's really great that you mentioned this glitter, because it happens to all of us that when we build a strategy, we see opportunities everywhere. But I remember reading once in a book about a strategy, that strategy is about choosing the things that you are focusing on, but also making sure that there are definitely in your strategy things you are not doing. And that's really, really important. So,
yeah,
so
look,
thanks
I
for
can give you
this.
examples in this as well, Marek. As I said, a lot of super apps have been successful based on social media, because social media is, I won't say easy, but it is, if it's sticky, then it is very sticky, right? And then the ability to then build a customer base off of that is great. Now, when we, started this journey of super app, there was a lot of questions and, strategic questions that came up, as like, what are we doing on social media? If you want stickiness to your platform, if you want a lot of eyeballs, if you want a lot of returning customers coming and just bumming around on your platform or your super app, then social media is the way to go. So this was, for example, for Careem, it was an extremely important and critical choice that we made, is that we're not going to do that. That our goal as a company is to simplify the lives of people in the region, right? And we will therefore focus on operational services, services that are needed to simplify the life of people. And in that, social media just did not add up. So we're not that company. We don't have that DNA. We don't want people to come and spend and waste their time on Careem just because we can get the eyeballs and we can generate money out of that. So again, it was both principled and strategic choices that we had to make, and these are big choices.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said that you are also looking on the market, and there is a question that we have on LinkedIn, so I would like to blend it in. There's a question about your approach when it comes to super apps. Where do you look for inspiration or benchmarks? Which companies do you think are doing it right?
Yeah, look, there's a whole, depending on how people define super apps, there's a whole host of companies that are claiming to be super apps. And as I said, I think the big ones, the ones that you obviously look up and admire, and we all should. Competition is a healthy thing. And again, these are not direct competition for us, but globally, these are players to emulate and learn from. Clearly, China is the flag bearer on the super app world, and WeChat and Alipay are really two big behemoths that are doing well. Meituan is another one. So clearly, the Chinese market is the one to look at. Now, of course, every market has its own dynamics, and what works for China doesn't work for us. But they've done this really, really well. Then, as I said, if you look at it, Amazon is a super app as well. They can turn that on or off depending on which market and how they want to play. There's so many services in that platform, and they do it really, really well. So that's something to learn as well. And then closer to home, more on the eastern side of the world, as I said, Grab and Gojek have done this pretty well as well. There are in Latin America, Rappi is another one that we look at, and but again, they're still relatively young in this journey, much like us. So I would say, yeah, those are the 3 or 4 or 5 benchmarks for us that we look at on a regular basis.
Perfect. To be honest, I haven't been thinking much about Amazon as a super app, but it makes a lot of sense. So that's a pretty cool example. And so right now, the pretty hot topic on the market is digital transformation. But you are a digital native company, so you don't need transformation. You just need constant acceleration. And many companies are struggling with that. Many companies are struggling to build their products quickly. You build a super app in a matter of, what was it, 2 years or less even. And yeah, so from your perspective, what kind of advice would you give to leaders that are struggling to accelerate their digital roadmap? Where to look for inefficiencies or improvements? Yeah, what kind of advice would you give them?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is a big one.
It is,
but
I know.
Based on last few years and our experiences, I would say the umbrella answer to that would be, of course, goes without saying, your product needs to be well thought through. It has to have a PMF, all that good stuff. So I'll take that as a given. But I think the difference between success and failure as an organization, when you're pivoting into a fairly big business model change, is how you set up your organization. I think that is critical. The amount of noise that gets created if you haven't given it deep thought in terms of whether the organizational structure is aligned with the business model can create a lot of friction and a lot of unrest in the organization. And no matter how pretty and beautiful and amazing your product and your thinking is about the product, you will struggle then to deliver as a company. So in my mind, for companies who are either changing their business model or stepping into something new, focus really, really hard on how the org should transform. And that's the hardest part to make it happen. Communicating it well, why you're doing it, how will this help people so that they get on board. And when you do hit the right PMF of your organization, you will know it because the noise goes down. The speed at which you start delivering things becomes much, much higher. So I think that is the most critical thing from a leadership standpoint to get it right. Everything else basically follows from there, whether it's KPIs and products and themes. It goes without saying, then the last part, which is critical, is resourcing. So, but again, the resourcing can only marry and map how you organize yourself. So get that thing right, spend enough time on it, and the rest will follow. It cannot be beaten around.
All right, so you start with the vision and strategy. You make sure that the org and the approach and the structure is adapted, and then team, resources, and execution, right?
That's correct. I mean, again, I'm simplifying it, but that's the only way to answer this question, right?
And again, exactly. I mean, it sounds simple.
Is about so the thing is, like, not all businesses understand what business model they're stepping into. They have a rough idea of where they want to go, but answering the question is like, what does that mean to your business model? And understanding that then drives what the org needs to support that business model. And that's where a lot of companies fail. And that's where there's a lot of noise that gets created in the system.
And you touched also on the human aspect of making it happen. And there was this nice quote from the Oracle CEO, Safra Katz, that the hard thing about these transformations isn't the technology, it's sociology. What do you think about that? Would you agree?
Oh, man, that's 100% true. That's 100% true, right? I mean, as I said, like you can be as excited as you need to be, and I'm in no way minimizing how important the real product and the thinking around that is. Absolutely, it is critical. It's amazing how important that is. But yeah, the difference between a successful company and a not so successful company is the social part of all of this? How do you bring this together with the people? How do you get them on board? How do you make sure that even the changes that have to happen rapidly happen with their understanding, with their commitment, and their enthusiasm behind it? Or else it becomes very, very hard. Absolutely.
And I mean, recently we are seeing the increasing number of people working remotely. That it just makes it harder to build this connection and to make it happen.
Yeah, look, this is something that companies like us and a lot of early-ish companies in the world today will have to grapple with. There are no clear answers yet. Now, I would say is we are still committed as a company to remote first, absolutely. But of course, as you imagine, if you look at this remote working as a product, then I don't think we have PMF yet. So there's a lot of work still need to be done. And of course, every company will have its own flavor of PMF. So we're all striving towards that. But I think it'll only happen if you have the commitment to it, and we should certainly do. But we'll have to find our, whatever we need to polish, we need to clean up and shape up for it to work for us. I would say the more mature companies will have it easier, where the product and the business models are more defined, then remote will work much, much better. But I think where organizations where they're jumping into something new, or there's always something changing, we'll have to get there soon, hopefully.
And you mentioned that you have full commitment to being a remote first. What are your, I don't know if you want to tell us secrets, but what are your secrets to make remote work effective and to, especially in such a high-paced environment as you are in?
Yeah, look,
tactics and secrets.
As I said, I don't think anyone has the answers yet. We are investing in some areas in this to land there. Clearly, as I said, I think if you get your org right, then a lot of these issues or the amount of collaboration you need to do or the amount of autonomy you can optimize or maximize goes a long way, right? So the more autonomous teams are, the better the chance that remote is going to work as well, right? So then one team can basically deliver everything it needs to deliver, and it's easier to then synchronize, collaborate, and get things done. When the collaboration increases across horizontally in a big company, that's where the chances of remote, creating trouble increases. So I think everything goes back to the structure again. So once you get your structure right, then set these teams in an autonomous way, put some processes in terms of when the larger teams or functions come together, minimize these meetings, minimize these touch points, and optimize the tools for good level of collaboration. I don't think the tools are there yet. For example, Zoom works out well for meetings, but how do you whiteboard in a meaningful way, without being in one room? So I'm sure there's a bunch of digital tools that are popping up, but there's none that I know mainstream that kind of works for everybody to really do the whiteboarding. And that's what's needed for new products, new ideas, new problems to solve. So I think that's where the focus is going to be. The rest is more around processes.
Yeah, but you mentioned one more important thing. So structure, yes, tools, yes, but you also mentioned culture. So teams to be autonomous, for trust to be built between the people on board. And it's something I also really believe in, that there needs to be a really strong culture full of trust and partnership in order to make remote really work.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's where I think the struggle is, where, high-performing teams that are already doing well can go into remote mode, and that's okay because everybody knows each other, and everyone knows what they need to do. It's when you're bringing a team together, a new team together, that whole, concept of norming, forming, all that stuff, and then performing, that needs to happen. And that is still, the jury's out in terms of how do you facilitate the norming and the forming part of teams in a remote setting. So I think that's what we need to crack. I'm sure, there's going to be an analog piece to it for sure, in terms of, every now and then the team comes together on a quarterly basis and spends some time, the whole human aspect, keeping the human aspect of it is alive. But I think, it's going to be a hybrid of those touch points and then going back and then doing your work facilitated with good tools.
Yeah, I think it's really similar about this. So the high value offline touchpoints plus being remote first as a potential solution. But as you said, there's no clear answer to it yet. So let's mix in some questions from the audience. There is one quite challenging. By 2025, 80% of customer service organizations will have abandoned native mobile apps in favor of messaging for better customer experience, according to Gartner. How do you want to deal with this trend?
Help me understand, and probably Marek,
let's try to figure it out together. So I think that the idea is that the native apps may lose users if there are because of the better customer experience. This is how I understand it.
Yeah, look, I mean, I completely agree and understand that customer experience is the bar, and that's going to go higher and higher for a successful platform. Now, I don't know if native apps is the reason why the experience is bad or not. I don't think so. That's the case. I mean, either your service has good experience or it doesn't. Either you choose to invest in it or not. And that's absolutely right. I mean, there's no way that a platform will survive and do well if customer experience is not at the core of it. And that's why one of the things I said in the beginning was, while you can do all the amazing things from a growth perspective, cross-selling, making sure that the right services are there for the customer, but at the base level, the hard part for a super app we are seeing clearly is that, in that whole portfolio of services, there has to be a minimum bar on experience that is delivered by each of the service. So whether it's my own services on the platform, so Careem's own services, or the third parties that we're working with, we need to track the core NPS of the customer and each of the funnels. What are the moments of truth, making sure that those experiences are managed well, they're doing well, because if there's one service that is just doing horribly on the platform, it really spreads like cancer, right? The customer has one bad experience and then they lose trust on the platform. And that's a shame, right? Because there's so much on the platform and it's a human thing. Like, I mean, if one experience or two experiences again and again are bad, then you basically write off the platform. So I think it's critically important for a super app to have an experience framework, experience program, and a governance model in which the tenants on the super app are managed such that this bar and experience is delivered. I think that's a non-negotiable, that's table stakes.
I fully agree. And I mean, people right now are used to and really expect beautiful software. They want the top quality of everything. And I think that the times where companies were able to kind of ignore it, like Salesforce did with their core product for quite a while, they're gone. And right now we all need to make sure that I really like the part that even if there's a tiny bit which is subpar, it may ruin the reputation. It may lead to people leaving the product. So I think this top quality from the product perspective, from the experience perspective, is essential. There is another question, which is even more difficult, I think. What do you think are the prerequisites to pivot into a super app?
Yeah, it's a good one. So I think let me marry this answer with when I started in terms of what are some of the super app models, right? So what does it take to be a super app? I mean, clearly you need one home run, right, of a service where you start and you have enough customer base or traffic on your app. So from there, you have to make a choice in terms of, do you want to keep that as the core? If that's very, very large, like in the case of WeChat and Alipay, where either it was social media sort of a core, or it was a finance core, which again, digital payments is a huge platform, and there's a lot of a huge customer base there. So you have to choose that if you have critical enough customer base then you can get into other services and choose where you're going to put your money on to make some other service as your core. So for example, for us, ride hailing was our core, but we are investing a lot of money and effort on pay, which is the fintech part of Careem. And we do believe that, with the right amount of focus, this is going to be the horizontal that will carry the super app customer base. So yeah, I think that question needs to be answered, and there are no clear answers. You have to choose, make your own choices on that. So that's one. The second one, as a prereq, I would say, is you have to have a few of your own services to be able to learn how to run and what do you need to build from a customer experience. So therefore, you have to start 2 or 3 services and make sure that their experiences are really, really top notch, as we discussed like a few minutes ago. So again, that's a non-negotiable. And then use that experience to build, or use that platform to build the right experiences to move a customer around on the platform, right? So I think those are the 3 or 4 things that have to come together. And then you can add more tenants. Now, that said, if you really think about it, why should a customer really care about you being a super app? If you answer that question, then that kind of tells you what the pivot needs to be, right? So it's really for 2 reasons. One is either the experiences make their life easier, and or they get value on being on your platform, right? So let's talk about experiences. In our world, for example, some things that we can do for the customer is, one is locations, right? We are a ride-hailing company. The customer already has their locations on the platform. If now I add a food experience or grocery experience or any other experience which has locations in it, I already have your favorite locations. You don't have to create those locations again and again and again in other services or other apps. So that's one experience benefit. Again, I have your credit card information and all your payment information, and you trust me because I have the basic infrastructure where your card doesn't disappear and it doesn't get charged. Again, if you trust me, then you will use the same infrastructure for any checkout experience on the super app as well. So you need to have some of these value props from an experience standpoint to pivot. And then the second one is value, right? I mean, the customer should feel like, since I'm doing business on your super app, I should be rewarded for it. And that's where at least our bet is that, we're putting together the subscription program called Careem Plus, for example, and that's doing really well. It's catching, a lot of growth right now. And then that's where the customer said, like, I'll invest this on a monthly basis, but for sure, the platform will give me at least 3 to 4x my investment in terms of value for using the services. So I think a mix of these 2 frameworks will kind of give you the answer in terms of how you want to pivot into a super app.
And you mentioned about trust. It was something that I haven't been thinking about, but it makes a lot of sense that when you have a super app, there's a certain level of trust that you have towards your brand. So when you are adding new services to it, people are more likely to use them because there's no gap of being a new player on the market. It's all Careem. So I imagine that this is also really important, also in terms of managing the relationship with the customer to make sure that this trust is maintained at all times.
That's right. I mean, look, it's easy to say, but it's very, really hard to execute on, right? I mean, it's hard enough when you run just one service and to make sure that brand and that trust is there. But again, as you start creating or adding more of your own services and then bringing on third parties, the onus and the responsibility is on you as a platform to make sure that this trust and the expectations from the customer is not broken. And that's predominantly around payment infrastructure because that's critical. But also some of these experiences that I said, for example, the location experiences, like these experiences have to be good and stable and repeatable so that every experience on the super app just feels familiar, right? I mean, it can't be that, you're doing food and it feels like a different app, and you're on ride hailing and it feels like a different app. Some of these core moments of truth have to be very, very familiar for the customer. And that's the hard part. And it's a journey, and we're definitely on that journey. There's still a lot to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about being lean or being effective at the end. So I was recently watching one of the interviews with Mudassir, CEO of Careem, and he mentioned that the core of the business, the ride-hailing business, is being profitable already. We also had last week, 2 weeks ago, a speaker on our talk from Bolt, VP of Product, Adrian, and he mentioned that when they were competing on the market, they were from Eastern Europe, and it was really interesting because one of the advantages, he said, was that they had limited access to capital. And because of that, they had to make everything extremely effective. And that led them to make those services profitable. Because many, if not all, of the services you have in the super app are really disruptive. And in the very beginning, there are many doubts whether they will ever be profitable. Like, what's your approach to this? Thinking about quick commerce or any other areas of the disruptions?
Yeah, look, Mudassir mentioned that as well the last few, speaking sessions that he's had. Over the course of this whole the change in the world with COVID, we went into this pandemic as a loss-making, high-growth ride-hailing company, and today we're coming out of it as a super app with a profitable core.
Exactly.
And there's a lot of work that went behind it, right? So I think, again, if you look at the portfolio, gone are those days where the SoftBank funded startups ready to jump on growth by burning money. That the market doesn't want it, right? Those are not sustainable business models. So we had to rejig and rethink the strategy, and we spent a lot of time on leaning up the ride-hailing organization in terms of picking and choosing what we invest in and what we don't, and then obviously working on the commercials as well to sort that out. Because the idea is that core will support our future growth of multiple other services that we're bringing together. And I mean, the truth is, while as hard as it was over the last year and a half, going through working where your ambition is way more than the resources that you have at hand, which, by the way, is a very good place to be always, right? You don't want it the other way around. It helps, and I always say that, it helps to work on your strategy when you don't have resources, because then you think really hard, you make smart moves, you make smart choices, and then you should execute that strategy when you actually do have the resources. So I think the last year and a half for us has been, quite challenging, but I think we made some very, very hard, but hopefully in the future, right choices. And those choices are that focus on investing in these startup disruptive businesses, get your core right so we can support this portfolio in a meaningful way as we go on this journey.
Yeah. And because I remember there were always this, I don't know if it's concerns, but suspicions that ride-hailing will never be profitable. And you prove that it can be. So right now it's the same about quick commerce.
Yeah.
Is your answer it will be, or you are not certain?
Oh, absolutely will be profitable. All of these businesses will be profitable. I mean, look, you just have to be smart in how you run it, right? I mean, I think most, if not all, ride-hailing companies across the world are getting there, if not already there, right? And again, ride-hailing used to be where like nobody ever believed that this is going to be a money-making business. So with the right market dynamics, with the right choices on what you focus on and how much you invest, how much do the customers really, really want, and how much is fluff on top, those are things you learn along the way. So that's on ride-hailing. I think it's pretty clear. I don't think we need to discuss that, right? But on quick commerce, right, there are some choices to be made. There's some companies, especially in groceries, that are going on the marketplace model, right, where they're aggregators for different stores on their platform, and that's a hard business to make profitable, right? So no matter how you cut it, the cost base is so heavy that it just seemingly is impossible to make meaningful profits, and that's why a lot of companies are going towards the whole dark store path, right? We're doing the same as well at Careem on groceries. We're going 15-minute ultra fast delivery in Dubai, for example, and we'll go across our network where we are setting up dark stores, and we are basically managing the value chain, because that's where the margins are. That's where the customer promise and experience is as well, right? We're selling quick, fast, guaranteed service based on a logistics platform that we already have and we know how to run. And we're just making sure that the margins actually work. So that's a scalable business. And that's where I think I wouldn't say it's a safe or easy bet. It's definitely the more meaningful bet for us for the future.
And I mean, especially that you have proven it in the ride hailing. So you have all the right to say that you will make it work as well. So thank you, Adeeb, for today, and congratulations on everything that has happened so far. It's a great story, a lot of insights and value. It was great.
Marek, thank you for having me. I hope this was a useful session. And we look at our partnership to do great things in the coming years.
Absolutely. Glad to be part of the journey. Thank you, Adeeb.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.